This is the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps, bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 Summit Sessions. Hello and welcome back to another Summit Session here on the 46 of 46 podcast. I have had a small hiatus because I've been on the road working for the last couple of months, but I am finally back home in the ADK. And it is good to be back in the mountains where I belong. Even driving through the southern part of the park yesterday, coming up, I passed so many trailheads that I've actually never even noticed, let alone hiked, and then I thought to myself, man, I love this park. Yes, it is good to be home smelling that fresh mountain air. However, it's still very much winter here in the Adirondacks. But this week I will be talking with a gentleman named Billy Rudd, who came to me with an interesting story that I thought needed to be told. However, Billy's initial story was secondary to the story that I saw in him. So Billy completed a single-season Winter 46, which is an amazing accomplishment in and of itself, even with Billy's already extremely impressive hiking resume that he has. But Billy also lives in Maryland. Yes, a single-season Winter 46 while living in Maryland, a 500-mile drive one way to the High Peaks. And he completed the Winter 46 in 2.5 months from over 500 miles away. But what caught my attention about Billy's story, however, is when he shared something rather personal with me about the journey. Billy recently went through a divorce, and his time in the High Peaks became his mental therapy to help begin the healing process. And that, to me, was the story, and a powerful one at that. And it's why I wanted to have Billy on the show. I've said it a million times on this podcast, these mountains possess healing powers. And I've heard it from so many people who went through similar life traumas, and they just sought refuge and they sought healing here in the wilderness. And they found it. So tonight we're going to hear all about Billy's story climbing these peaks in a very short time, and the long drives, and the therapy that he ultimately received from our beloved 46 High Peaks. Billy, thanks so much for coming on the show, and welcome to the 46 of 46 podcast.
Glad to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. First off, I know you're an Air Force veteran, so a sincere thank you for your service to this country. I have great respect for anyone who serves the country, so I appreciate that. I wanted to tell you that right off the bat. And bravo for not only completing a single-season Winter 46, but doing it from over 500 miles away. That is an amazing feat, so a big congratulations as well to you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you're from Watertown, first of all, and then you moved to Maryland, as you mentioned, and you have a very impressive hiking resume, if you kind of want to call it that. But being in Watertown, you're not far from the Adirondacks. But hit us with a little story about you, a little background. How'd you get into the outdoors? And, take us through kind of your story. And also, don't be afraid to talk about some of those impressive things on that hiking resume, because you've done a lot of stuff, especially here in the Northeast.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit up there. So I grew up on a dairy farm just south of Watertown, right there in the lake effect area. So I grew up outdoors, loving, was just outdoors every day. And then after high school, that's when I joined the Air Force and moved away, lived in a bunch of different states. And to make a long story short, I ended up in Maryland. And but all along, I've always been very outdoorsy and into hunting and hiking and things like that. And one year I was up in Old Forge camping with my father, and I actually had a flat tire on my car, 2 flat tires actually, from the drive up. And so I was sitting in a garage waiting for my tires to get changed because I don't carry 2 spares. And I was looking at an article, in a magazine there in the waiting area, and I saw something about 46ers, and I asked my dad, I'm like, what are 46ers? And he's like, oh, your cousin's one of those. And he explained it to me, and right then, that's all I needed to hear. And that's kind of how I started my journey. So yeah, I took a couple years to become a kind of a summer 46er, I guess you would say, making the drive from Maryland up to the high peaks. And then, I started doing other things, and that morphed into ultra running. And eventually I ended up doing the New Hampshire 48 in 10 days. I've done the Northeast 115. I did a single season Northeast Ultra 8. I did your Lake Placid 9 Ultra, which was an awesome challenge, by the way. Bob Marshall finisher. So yeah, a lot of things up there. But yeah, then a single season winter 46 last year. It would have been winter of 2021 from 500 miles away. So again, I was already a 46er, so I kind of knew what it entailed, but a winter 46 was a whole different animal because I had never winter hiked before. And also just the logistics of it was very challenging as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, I could imagine. So real quick, before we get into that, I want to hear a little more about the New Hampshire 48 in 10 days. So was that like, did you kind of plan because you can't really through hike those mountains. So how did you go about breaking that up? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I actually broke it up into two. So you can through hike it. It's called a diatissima if you through hike it. Yeah. So I don't know what the record for it is. Maybe between 6 and 7 days, something like that. But so I broke it into two sections: a 4-day section and a 6-day section. And since I was working on a Northeast Ultra 8, kind of along the same lines, I did a Super Pemi, which is like 12 high peaks in a day. A Prezi, which is like 8 high peaks in a day. I did the Wildcat Carter Mariah Traverse, which is like 6 high peaks in a day. So kind of like the Adirondacks, there's a lot of combinations of mountains. So you can rack up, they're long days, but you can rack up a lot of peaks in a day, if you start early and end late.
Yeah, sure. That's actually something that's like, it's on my list at some point in my life to, You said you've listened to this podcast for a long time, so clearly you've heard a lot of FKT episodes, and I feel like I've spoken to I feel like if you've attempted an FKT in the last 3 or 4 years, you've been on this podcast, because I just have heard it so many times. So in my life, I want to through hike the high peaks. I don't have any desire to, try to do it for any sort of time, but that is a bucket list thing I would like to do. Basically just do all of them in one push, and I'll do it eventually. But very cool.
I'm not an FKT type of athlete. I'm not that fast, but I can suffer shuffle for a long time.
Oh man, you and me both.
I'm more like a pacer.
The suffer shuffle. I like that. I've never heard that. You should coin that. That belongs on a t-shirt, especially for something like the Bob Marshall Traverse, which is quite the hike all in and of itself. And clearly you can suffer if you're going through the Bob Marshall Traverse.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome day in the woods. I actually did attempt that as an FKT attempt, and right away it rained for a couple days beforehand, so all the trails were at least over ankle deep, and I didn't even have a chance really. So, and I'm not as fast as Jonathan anyway, so I just made a great day out of it.
Very cool. Yeah. Now, you said when you started the winter 46, that was your introduction to winter hiking. So is
Correct.
That was your first high peak, your first winter mountain?
Yes, It would have been. So I remember the summer before, I actually think it was 4th of July. I was sitting outside in Maryland, and it was so hot. It was one of those 90-something degree days. And I was like, I bet winter gear is super cheap right now. And I went on like backcountry.com, and I bought some snowshoes for like 30% off, and an ice axe for like a 25% off. And I didn't know I was going to do a single season winter. I think originally I thought if I had done 10 peaks, that would have been a really good shot. But it morphed into something else for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. So speaking of that, so when we emailed back and forth, you told me about your single season winter 46, and to quote you said it was a mental therapy project to help me heal following a divorce that you went through. So I want to get into a little more about that. I've said so many times on this podcast and, to hikers on the trail and to just people in general, because if you start talking about, the Adirondack Mountains, I'm going to talk for a long time about them, because I know, the healing powers that these mountains possess. I've been very fortunate to be in the position that I am, where people kind of volunteer stories to me in, Facebook messages and Instagram messages about, what these mountains have done for them. And it's honestly why I thought your story should be told. So many listeners out there, I know from messages that I've received from people and stories I've read, even on, Lake Placid Niner, hiking challenge, submission forums, comments, like people will tell you their whole story. I've heard everything from, there's other stories where, people were about to get a divorce and they started hiking together, and it was what opened the lines of communication for them, to, kind of dive into their problems. I've heard people who went through divorces and then they decided to retreat to nature, and they took up hiking, which was a totally foreign thing to them, and it's just life changing. So, whatever kind of trauma people are going through, for some reason, we do kind of retreat to nature, and we kind of follow through with that primal instinct. So talk to me a little bit about what led you to, seeking healing in that situation, in the outdoors, and then I guess the high peaks specifically.
Yeah. So, I guess one of the things I left off my resume is, when you were asking about my hiking resume, is I've also hiked quite a bit of the Appalachian Trail as a section hiker. And the very first through hiker of the Appalachian Trail, his name was Earl Schaefer, and he did it, I think, in like 1948. And after he completed his through hike, a reporter asked him basically why did he do it, or what was his purpose for being out there. And he was a veteran, and his quote was that he was walking off war. And I think a lot of people deal with war, and war doesn't have to mean that you went to Afghanistan. And certainly when Earl Schaefer hiked the Appalachian Trail, he wasn't in the Pacific anymore. War is in your mind, and war can be in your head. It can be in your heart. It can be for various different reasons. It can be from actual PTSD. It can be from a divorce. It can be from death, various other reasons. For me, I had gone through a divorce, and just right in the middle of December, right before Christmas, and I have kids, and that was mentally really, really hard on me. And so I wanted to pour myself into some sort of physical effort that I knew was going to challenge me, but something that also was going to require a lot of planning. And I don't want to say like distract me, because distracting says like you're like avoiding. That wasn't the case. Really, to kind of heal me. So the planning was healing, and how am I going to get there? What's the weather going to look like? What combination of mountains am I going to do? And I only have essentially 91 days to get this done. And also, I had just had shoulder surgery in the beginning of December as well. So I was literally physically healing and emotionally healing. And so that's probably I guess I had my own reason to kind of walk off war. Mm-hmm. And all the miles that are in your head. And I made, while I was out there, and we can get into it, but I made tons of friends. I think you and I have a lot of common friends, but I have so many amazing friends in the hiking world, and a lot of them I made during my single season 46. And it was extremely therapeutic for me. I came out the other side a completely different person 3 months later.
That's just fantastic to hear. Very inspirational to hear. And that comment that he made about walking off war, like you said, trauma can be anything. And that's I feel like that's just kind of a message that everybody can relate to. And for some reason, you go into the woods and you come out with so much more clarity than when you went in. And it even can be one of those things where you're completely distracted during the day. You're not thinking, you're not going through the steps in your brain as to, as you start to process certain things, but you're able to kind of put them aside and go out and go into the woods and spend the day on the trail in the mountains. And then you come out and you just have so much more clarity. And it's like, you didn't even notice when that happened, but it's almost like it just magically happens inside your brain. At least I've experienced that many times. And that's, it's just a fascinating concept that the guy mentioned about walking off war.
Yeah, it's such a healthy outlet. I mean, you think about really when you're in this situation, you can make good decisions or you can make bad decisions. And I'm certainly not judging anybody, but some people turn to drug and alcohol use or even just cooping themselves at home and just stewing in their thoughts. Or you can have healthy outlets, whatever those are, and it can be hiking, it can be running, it can be whatever, getting back out there. But certainly there's something to wilderness therapy. I saw just recently in the news that in Canada, just across the border from you, doctors are actually prescribing trips to national parks now for mental health.
That's
Isn't
incredible.
that crazy?
That's incredible. Yeah. And I know, big podcast personality here, Eric Schlimmer, who is a therapist, and specifically with veterans. He's a veteran himself. Shout out to you, Eric. He's doing very similar things with veterans and wilderness therapy right now. So yeah, there's definitely something to it. And going back to what you said, I know this is a hiking podcast, but going back to what you said about the outdoors being a healthy outlet when dealing with trauma. I know within my own life, years back, dealing with certain situations, and what you talked about with, some people turn to drugs and alcohol, and I'm not here to judge either. I know during a situation that I went through, I understood why people turn to certain things like that, because once the sun goes down, it's like anything to get through the night, to get through to the next day. And I understand that, that like pit in your stomach, and there's nothing that you can really do. And I know for myself in that situation, I also made a conscious decision to not go down that, that path, like not give in to those demons and take that, drugs and alcohol approach. But again, I understand it because everyone's different, and at the end of the day, it's literally just to get through the night. When the sun goes down, stuff is tough. And I also made similar decisions as you to, pursue a different outlet because I didn't want to go down that path. I wanted to do some better things and things that I knew would be beneficial to my mind and, physically, all those things. And I can relate very strongly to you deciding to choose nature, choose the outdoors, choose something physical. I can relate very much to that. I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate as well. Now, you mentioned before, to lighten the mood a little bit, you mentioned before about your injuries. And I know you mentioned to me that you had a collapsed lung and you were in the hospital during this journey. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I didn't get off to a good start for the single season. So like I said, I just had shoulder surgery in the beginning of December. So, when the winter officially started right before Christmas, I wasn't quite healthy enough yet to really use trekking poles to pull myself up a mountain or something. But about a week later, I was ready to go. I felt like anyway. And so we were going to start on Allen Mountain. I think it was December 30th. And so hiked in, got all the way to the Opalescent River, which is about 4 miles in, and the river was still open. And we went up and down the river for probably an hour trying to find a way across, and we could not find a way across. And we also knew that coming back down, it would be in the dark and we would probably have just as much, we may not be able to get back across. So I got turned around on the very first hike of the single season winter, oh my gosh, I was like, this is going to be horrible. So actually went over, visited my parents over by Watertown, came back to the Adirondacks a couple days later on January 1st. And I did a Giant and Rocky. I did a Big Slide. And then on January 2nd, I did the Sewards. And all through the Sewards, I was just like huffing and puffing. I was like, what is wrong with me? I'm every chance, I could stop, but, I was like, just breathing hard. And so did all the Sewards. And that was my last set of mountains for that trip. This took 6 trips from Maryland up. When I got back to Maryland, I was like, I just don't feel right. And I've had a collapsed lung in the past. I have a history of them. And so I went to the doctors, and yeah, lo and behold, I had done the sewer drainage
Wow.
with on one lung. So I was into the hospital for me with a chest tube and all that kind of stuff.
Now,
So
what causes a collapsed lung, out of
uh,
curiosity? Or what caused yours, I
yeah,
should say?
yeah. So for me, I'm just kind of predisposed to them.
Hmm.
Yeah, usually they happen in skinny males that are tall. I'm not tall. I'm only like 5'8", but and usually younger, like guys who are growing still, like 16, 18 years old. That's about 9 out of 10 patients. That's who they are. But yeah, I have like these little blisters on my lung that are they're just there, and sometimes they pop. So I had another one back in this past October, and I finally got the real surgery that I needed. So they've literally basically glued my lung to my chest wall now, and if it pops
Wow.
again, it cannot collapse. So I'm good to go, hopefully
All
for
right.
life. I got a lifetime warranty.
All right. There you go. Now you're ready for the Bob Marshall Winter Traverse.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think so.
The Winter FKT to beat Jonathan Zaharik's Winter FKT of the Bob Marshall. Anyways, oh yeah, fascinating. And it's actually quite funny that your very first trip, day one, it was Alan, so serves you right for going right for Alan. But it's
Oh my
also pretty
gosh.
funny that's what happened on day one. But kudos to you and props to you for not letting that deter your goal and your mission. Very cool. So, you did 6 trips. So we're talking 6,000 miles,
Yeah.
across the country and back. So you basically did a cross country trip and hiked 46 mountains in the winter during that trip. That's pretty fascinating, especially when gas is $1 million. Or I guess this was last winter, so gas wasn't $1 million a gallon just yet. But
yeah, not too bad.
it was still approaching that. But one other question too, going back with this whole concept of nature is healing, and when we retreat to nature, we do find clarity. And you mentioned that you came out on the other side a completely changed person. So were there moments out on the trail that you had, I don't know if to call them an aha moment, or you had clarity, you saw maybe wounds starting to heal, or kind of take me through a little more about that transformation to when you started, which it was very fresh at that point, to 3 months later where you said you were a completely changed individual.
Yeah, I don't know that I had necessarily any like big aha moments. I think it was just a culmination of the entire experience. I think a lot of it, again, was a combination of making making new friends and spending time with old friends as well. And also I did quite a bit of it solo as well, and just having time to think and be in kind of the solitude. And I think as a creature, I mean, we come from nature, we evolved from nature. So I think when times get tough, I don't think it's unnatural for us to want to go back to nature, because that's what we know. We didn't come up in concrete and glass and right angles and blue light shining in our face and traffic, and and it feels so good to be where it's quiet. I mean, you think about it, if you're standing on the summit of Algonquin and you're not looking towards Lake Placid, you're looking any other direction, like you cannot see any signs of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see a house, you don't see a telephone pole. Rarely do you even see an airplane flying over, the High Peak area. And it's just, I don't know, it's almost primitive. Like it takes you back to these different instincts. And I think maybe that's what is partially healing. I think the other thing too is there's a physiological response to it as well. I hear some people say that they get addicted to hiking or they get addicted to running. And I think sometimes they think they're half joking, but your body does release things like dopamine and endorphins and serotonin and adrenaline and things like that. And your body likes those things, and they make you feel good. And so there's a physiological benefit to it as well. And you can get like chemically addicted to those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that, I always talk to people about training in the weight room and then hiking as well. Like those are the two things that I like to do, and that's definitely, that high that you get is, I mean, it's real and it's authentic and it's very good for you. One day in the high peaks, I'm good for 2 weeks after one day in the high peaks. I'm still on that high. Like if I go on a Saturday, okay, I don't need to necessarily go out into the high peaks next Saturday because I'm still so good from last weekend's adventure. And then another couple days go by, and then I'm definitely ready to get back out there. But there is something to be said about that, absolutely. And anyone listening to this podcast, you probably wouldn't be listening if you don't also understand that same concept and have experienced it yourself firsthand.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did a lot of these hikes solo, and then you did some with other people. With it being a winter single season, did you tackle some? Did you start hiking with people first, and then you hit some solos, or did you just do some solo winter hiking right from the get go? Take me through that.
Yeah. No. So I would say the first 2 trips up there. The first trip for sure. So I did, day one, I did, Giant and Rocky with, Brian Twardy and Brittany Bowman. And then I went over and did Dig Slide by myself that same day. But there really wasn't any snow at that point, so I could just kind of run up it in spikes. And then the Sewards I did also with Brian and Brittany. And then on my next trip up, I did, Redfield, Cliff, and Marshall one day, and I did that with my friend Robert. We broke trail all day. It was wow. It was rough. It was a rough day. And then another funny story. We both slept in our cars because we did Allen the next day and broke trail on that as well, along with our buddy Jeremy. And we both got a mouse infestation in our cars. I don't know how mice get into your new car. We both have new cars. But when he got home after this trip, he caught 2 mice in his car, and I had a mouse in my car as well. It chewed through my sleeping bag. So that's pretty crazy.
I've never heard that ever. I
don't know how they got in. Doors are sealed up. I don't know if there's little cracks that they can get into or how they do it, but yeah.
I've also never even seen mice of any kind out in the woods, but I'm sure they're there. I've definitely had them in my house, but I've never necessarily seen them out on the trail.
Wow. Apparently the upper works has an infestation.
Yeah, I see that. Good to know.
Yeah.
Even in the wintertime, though, those little creatures are out squirming around everywhere. So,
I'd say my third trip, I started doing kind of more solo adventures on my own.
And would you say you were, obviously you must have been somewhat comfortable by that point going solo in the winter. Winter's, as I've said before, winter's a totally different animal than summer hiking. Did you go solo as you felt comfortable, you were ready, or was it more like this is my trip, I have to go out of necessity that going solo? Or was that partly by design?
Yeah, no, I would never put myself at risk, I'm especially in the winter, it's definitely safety first. So, I think I did maybe that next trip, Tabletop and Phelps,
Sure.
They're not on open summits. They're on a popular trail. I think I did Esther and Whiteface solo on that next trip, again, popular. Though, Whiteface is exposed, and it was really cold, but it was a bluebird day that day. So yeah, just kind of pick and chose, and the longer days, I had a Dick's Traverse in there where we went from Round Pond to Elk Lake. That was definitely with friends, because it's just a long day and a lot can happen on a big day like that over 5 peaks.
Yeah, 100%. Real quick, where do you fall in the debate? MSR snowshoes or Tubbs snowshoes?
Oh, I'm team MSR.
Ugh,
yeah.
Gross.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to personal preference.
Oh, of course. And they both work.
I wear the Lightning Ascents. I definitely think those are quieter for sure than the Tubbs. But the Tubbs, I really like the bindings on those. I don't own a pair, but a lot of my friends have them. And they look really cool, and 2, those bindings are awesome.
Yeah, the bindings are always my comment about MSR is I just hate them so much. There's 18 bindings or 18 straps on the bindings.
But not on the Lightning Ascents. They don't, they're just a one piece
okay.
thing. Yeah, they're really nice. You're talking about the Evos. Yeah,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
ones are.
That's what I feel like I
Yeah,
always see.
yeah, those are trash. I don't like those.
But yeah, I always like to ask people that conversation because and I've yet to have anyone say, "Well, I actually use X snowshoes." It's always either MSR or Tubbs. That's why
Yep.
I like to phrase it that way. But now let's talk some different stories. So, you know, throughout this journey, you clearly must have had some days that were like, "This is the best thing ever," and there must have been days. And I know, I mean, everyone who's winter hikes knows there's days where you're like, I am never hiking ever again, ever. This sucks so bad.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, what was your best memory, best, maybe best range or best mountain, and then like the trip that was the worst. I mean, maybe it was breaking trail to Cliff Redfield and Marshall. I don't know. What would you say throughout your 2.5 months out there that were those two extreme ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, I would say probably the two hardest. Well, the 2 days that really stick out in my mind is the day that I did Allen. So we broke out Redfield, Cliff, and Marshall the day before, and then the next day we had to break out Allen, and it was just three of us. And so oh my gosh, every 10 minutes we were switching who was in front, and it took us like 15 hours. It was a long, long day. It took us I guess 9 hours to reach the summit and then 6 hours to get back. So that was just so tough. My legs were exhausted. But yeah, Robert and Jeremy and we became suffer buddies for life for sure after that experience. Yeah. And then the other day that stands out in my mind is the day, well, we had a big group of us that went and did Haystack Basin and Saddleback for a couple people that were finishing that day. And it was just snowing sideways, really windy. It wasn't dangerous, but it looked a lot worse on video than it really was when you were in the situation. But it was just a really cool experience. As soon as you got back down in the trees, it was nothing. So that was a really cool experience. And then, of course, my finishing day, I finished on with Gray Skylight and then on Marcy, and that was really cool too because I had again a bunch of friends with me. I finished my original 46 on Marcy. I finished the Northeast Ultra 8 on Marcy, and then I finished my Winter 46 on Marcy as well. So it's become kind of a special place to me. So that was an awesome day as well.
Very cool. Yeah, that's so clearly there's a soft spot in your heart for that mountain. That's actually like, if you were to ask me, what's your favorite high peak to be on top of? I'm always saying Marcy. I know there's obviously every mountain's got cool views, and there's Haystack's a fan favorite. But for me, there's my two most memorable days that I've spent hiking, both involved Mount Marcy. They both started on Mount Marcy, I should say too. So yeah, I have a soft spot for Marcy.
A Great Range Traverse? Did you do GRT?
The Great Range Traverse, which was a sunrise in the summer, which was awesome. Sunrise starting on the Great Range on Marcy, and then another day was a winter sunrise on Marcy. That was and the day we were up there, there was also like, obviously Marcy's a 360 view. You're on top. You're the top of the world at that point. Both days we were the only people up there on the summit, and then in the winter though, there was a half cloud inversion, so that was awesome, and then the other side of the world was just clear blue sky. So like, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better.
That's beautiful.
And at that hour in the winter in particular, when there's the the rime ice on all the trees and the wind and everything, it's like you're just on a different planet at that hour before the sun has come up, and as the sun like starts to peek through, as you leave tree line, like it's just a day I will remember until the day I die. That winter sunrise in particular. Shout out to Jonathan and Kira for coming with me on that hike. That was awesome. But yeah. So Marcy's also a soft spot in my heart as well.
Cool.
So let's talk something more important, possibly the most important question that I could even ask you on this podcast.
Oh, man.
What is your winter post-high peak routine in terms of food and refuel and Stewart's milkshakes? Take me through what you're getting.
So after the hike, what am I getting? Yeah, definitely headed to Stewart's. Always feels good to be back in New York and see a Stewart's. But what I like is how much food you can get for like so little money. Like I'm getting probably 2 slices of buffalo chicken pizza,
Absolutely.
probably a cup of chili, probably a Gatorade and a strawberry milkshake extra thick.
Oh, obviously you're going extra thick. Like we're not going to get
Is that
not
even a
extra thick.
question?
Yeah. Or I mean that was a given. Obviously you're going extra thick after a hike.
Yeah. So that's just to get me back to the hostel or wherever I'm staying
For
when I'm up
sure.
there. Yeah.
Now, I know you mentioned you guys had to turn around on Allen on day one. Were there any other days that I don't maybe they winter obviously things change really quickly. Anything turned sketchy, or did you have to orphan any peaks, or other than Allen entire hikes altogether?
Yeah, so when we did the Sewards, and again, I was huffing and puffing that day, but I think we originally hoped to get Seymour that day, but it was a really tough day. The day before, there really wasn't any snow, but it snowed pretty hard overnight, and we had quite a bit of snow up high. So we were breaking trail all day. It was Brian, Brittany, and myself, and so that day was really we struggled, and by the time we got up, we did Donaldson, Emmons, Donaldson, and then Seward. And then by the time we got to the bottom of Seward, we just couldn't, none of us had it in us to do Seymour. So I don't know if that really is considered orphaning it or not. I don't think it's, it's not completely abnormal to,
I wouldn't call
make that
orphaning.
2 trips.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it orphaning.
And no, the only other one I kind of abandoned on, and again, like I said, I put safety first in this case, but on one of the trips up there, I was going to do the Colvin Range, and it was going to be on the last day of that trip. And the weather forecast was -60 to -80 mile an hour wind chills in the Colvin Range, and I was like, no, no, thanks. I want to make sure I keep all my fingers and toes. It just wasn't worth it. And so actually the next time I came back and I did that, it was like 40, 50 degrees that day. I was doing it in a t-shirt.
Oh,
so,
perfect.
Yeah, it was like 100-degree swing in temperature. So that was a good call.
Yeah, big time. How was the Saddleback Cliffs for you? And which direction did you go? I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, we went down the cliffs. So
okay.
that was a really windy, snowy experience. So it was pretty crazy. We had a really strong group of hikers. So Jonathan and I kind of navigated our way down the cliffs. We took point on that, and made it down uneventfully. I've only been up the cliffs one time. Every other time I'm always going down the cliffs. So.
Okay. I've actually never gone down. I've only gone up a handful of times. What was your technique going down? So, were you able? Did you just straight slide it? Did you have to actually have some climbing tools? Like, what was your technique getting down it?
So we didn't rope up or anything like that, but and it's tough in snowshoes. You feel like you're wearing these big clown shoes and everything's awkward, and you're carrying a little heavier pack. And so, but the good thing is some of the jumps or falls or whatever you want to call them, the ledges aren't as high in the winter as they are in the summertime, just because of the snow buildup down below. So I didn't really find it too technical. There was a couple places where it's kind of like a controlled slide / crash, going down. It's not dangerous, but it's thrilling. That's for sure. And there's definitely some spruce traps in there that you got to watch out for as well down there in those calls.
Yeah, indeed. And just coming down, so if you went down the Saddleback Cliffs, that means you also went down Basin, which is steep, super steep as well. Yeah, that's definitely that's another kind of tough element you get if you go that direction. So you finished that day on Haystack, and
we had 2 friends finish their Winter 46 that day on Haystack. So that was really cool. I mean, the weather it just made it just like a really cool conditions, to be out there. So, and the butt sliding was great that day as well. So,
love when that is the case. So now, where do you rank this single season Winter 46 experience amongst all of the other things you've done? So you're already a 46er. You've done, the New Hampshire 48 in 10 days. That's that's one adventure. The single season is an adventure. Your first 46er story is an adventure. Where do you rank this experience amongst all the other pretty awesome things you've done?
yeah, I mean, I put it right up there at the top of the list. You know, it's not a necessarily like a single day experience, but um, yeah, I think I would probably put it right up there. One for kind of what I was going through in my personal life. Two, it was really my first winter experience, the physical challenge of it, the planning that went into it, all the friends. Um, yeah, but that's going to be hard to beat. And honestly, I mean, I love all these other mountain ranges, and there's great mountains all over this country. But you know, the Adirondacks are they're home to me, and even though I don't live there, it's a special place. So yeah, that ranks right at the top of my list for me.
That's very cool. Yeah, you think of it as your home range in a sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I can, obviously I can relate very strongly to that sentiment. Now, were there any days when you were out there where you were like, okay, I like winter hiking a lot better than summer hiking? Because I find that winter hiking really grabs people quickly, especially when they give it, because there's always that initial, like, you kind of got to get over that hump to be able to really see what winter hiking is. Would you say, you know, you prefer winter hiking over summer, or are you still kind of a summer guy?
Yeah, I would say I prefer winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Just you think about all summer long, we kind of complain about the trail conditions, you know, with all the rocks and roots and mud and all that kind of stuff. And in the winter, it's flawless. It's exactly what you want. It's just like this paved trail, and as long as you're not breaking trail. So yeah, the trail conditions are better. In some ways, it's easier, especially, you know, if your snowshoes have the heel ascenders on them. Like sometimes in the summer, I'm like, man, I wish I had some heel ascenders on my trail runners. You know, it'd be make this a lot easier. So, yeah, I think heel ascenders make it easier. The trail conditions make it easier. Butt sliding makes it easier. There's no bugs. But there's other things too. Like you're always kind of putting layers on, taking layers off. You know, your water is typically deep in your pack somewhere, trying not to freeze. So you always have to take your pack off if you're thirsty. And it's a little slower, and it's a little more tedious, and you have to be a little more mindful of, you know, just because you're cold, you know, you do still have to drink.
Yeah.
Cold,
I have learned that colder. The hard way.
You can dehydrate pretty easily in the winter. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I like winter. I mean, I love both, but yeah, I would probably give the nod to winter. And plus, there's just not quite as many people out there either.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, you know, you get that soft spot for the winter season, and you know, obviously it's way easier on the joints, so that's also really helpful. But yeah, there's just something about being on top of the high peaks or any mountain in general in the winter compared to the summer, because you almost feel like in the winter, you know, you look around, and like you were saying before, where, you know, like, let's say you're on Algonquin and you look out away from Lake Placid, and you just say, like, you can't see any sign of civilization, and you almost feel like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be able to be here. And there's that, it's just like, there's just something different about that feeling in the winter versus the summer in particular. And of course, in the winter, so much more can go wrong, and I actually feel like that, you know, that adds an element of accomplishment to the task at hand, that, you know, things can go wrong. Obviously, we do everything we can to avoid that, but that little element of fear, I think, adds to the experience and the accomplishing feeling that you get when you get to a summit of a high peak, and you look around and you're just like, this is just the wilderness around me. And it grabbed me very quickly when I started winter hiking as well.
Do you prefer winter hiking?
Oh, yeah, I definitely do. I think it's well, I will say this. I prefer winter hiking when I can actually find someone to go with me. I don't go into the high peaks solo. I'm out like what you did with, you know, Big Slide or Phelps and Tabletop. Like I'll do mountains like that solo, but in general, I'm much more cautious with winter hiking and always trying to find someone to go with me, versus in the summer, you know, I don't really care if someone comes with me or not. Obviously, it's more enjoyable to have someone to chat with throughout the day. But from like a safety standpoint, yeah, my wife definitely feels much better in the winter if I'm with someone. So that slows down the winter season. But the days on the trail in the winter, to me, is just, it's almost like like you were saying, in the summer, I'm just thinking back to the winter season. Whereas in the winter season, I'm not necessarily thinking to summertime. And maybe around like right now, late March, and once April hits, it's like, yep, I'm ready for summer. I'm ready to be out in a t-shirt and shorts, and it'd be no big deal. But then once you get out there, it really is like, oh man, remember when I'd walk down this trail and it was just smooth, and now I'm like stepping down boulder to rock to boulder to root. Oh, I just stubbed my toe on that root that I didn't see. You don't get any of that in the winter. So yeah, I would definitely fall in, the soft spot for the winter side of things. And those mountains do that. They do that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I agree with you. What you said. I've thought that so many times. Like when you're standing somewhere where humans shouldn't be standing at that time, it's just, wow, it's so it's just a great feeling, and really speaks to having good gear as well.
Oh yeah.
But it's such a cool accomplishment.
It's a neat thing too, because in the summertime, obviously, like you said, the trails are a lot busier, but the average person can get up to the top of this mountain. It might be tough, but you can get up there. But there's just something different about the winter where, like I said, you feel like you shouldn't be there. And that, I don't know, that feeling, I guess it's hard to really explain unless you've been out there in the winter and experienced it yourself. But yeah, it's definitely an addicting feeling.
Yeah.
But, this time of year, I am ready for the snow to melt. Winter was slowly going away, but of course it's not even April yet, so obviously we know winter is not gone here. If you go to Keene, it looks like winter's gone, but in Lake Placid, no. I was shoveling my driveway just a few hours ago, so the snow is very much still here.
Yes.
So as we start to wrap things up here, I have a couple other questions. I just want to kind of tie up the episode here with going back to your comment about mental therapy project for healing, that this whole thing was. What advice would you give to someone who might be going through some similar trauma or similar experiences or circumstances in life, in terms of like encouraging them to maybe seek the outdoors? What type of advice would you have to someone, and based on what you experienced for yourself?
Yeah, well, I would 100% encourage it, for sure, if that's something that they're familiar with and they know how to do, and if it's something that they want to break into, to find a group or find people that can kind of introduce them to it and get them out there. I have friends who I would say are very much city people who don't get out to the woods that often, and I've taken them to the woods, and they come back completely changed after a weekend, and they talk about it for years about, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go hiking again or do that again. It changes you regardless of your background. It's there's no doubt that there is something to it. I don't know that I can put my finger on exactly what it is, but it certainly works, and all I would say is just get out there. It's free.
Oh yes.
Just put on some clothes and get outside.
It is certainly something that it's hard to explain until you experience it. You're just always so confident when talking to people, knowing, just come with me and just come experience it. You will. And that's how I feel about the outdoors. The outdoors will do the rest. But real quick, some fun questions to end the episode with that I like to ask everyone here on the Summit Sessions. What is a fun item that you always have in your backpack, that you have to have in your backpack, that is unique to you?
A fun item. It seems like I would know this. I've heard like every episode.
Doesn't have to be fun as necessarily. Just like, what's a unique item that's always in your backpack that might be like, unique to you?
Even in the summertime, I keep base layers in my pack, which sounds kind of weird sometimes, but there's been times where I was so glad in the middle of July or August that I had base layers to change into. So it sounds kind of weird and it's a little bit extra weight, but man, base layers always.
It's funny you say that, because I also in the summer keep base layers in my pack, because some people keep a puffy in their pack all year long. For myself, I always have rain stuff in the pack, but I also keep base layers in because they're just like, you hope you're not going to need it. You think you probably won't need it, but they take up no room. They weigh nothing, so it's like it's not a bad emergency item to have. I also have a balaclava, or however that word is pronounced, in my pack too, because it's a big bang for your buck as far as heat retention in the summer if you have to stay overnight. But yeah, I also I'm with you there. I always have a top and bottom in my pack. Now, second question: what makes the Adirondacks a special place to you?
I think it's, for me, the Adirondacks. I think it's just the ruggedness of it, that it's untamed. Again, I've been to a lot of other mountainous areas, and they just seem to be more developed. And the Adirondacks, though, I'm not necessarily a purist in the sense of not changing it ever, but I do like just how rugged and remote you feel when you're in the Adirondacks, and not just the High Peaks region, other parts of the Adirondacks as well. I've explored all over. It's just, whether you're in a lake somewhere or on a high peak somewhere, it's it's almost like a land that time forgot about, and it takes you back to, I don't know, your senses are just kind of pricked up a little bit more.
Time did forget about the Adirondacks. We are always very far behind the times here in the park, but there's something to be said about that, and I do think that that's a big attractive point for why people also venture up here year after year, and for some people week after week. And my final question: why do you hike? What's the reason for you?
Just my love of the outdoors. I like the physical challenge of it. The friends that I've made, if you think about the population of people that are in the hiking world, for the most part, I would say that is a friendlier population than maybe the general population. So, it really just kind of restored my faith in humanity with all the people that I interact with, both, when I'm hiking or just, on social media or whatever. So, it's just, it really does fulfill me in so many ways. So
that's great.
That's what I like.
Well, Billy, this has been awesome. Where can people find you online?
At BR Cloudsplitter, all one word. And that's on Instagram. And that's it.
And you're about to launch a new business. Hit me.
Yeah, Cloudsplitter Coffee. So it's launching here in about 2 weeks. Probably be live by the time this podcast is released. And we're a fresh roasted coffee company. So you order it, we roast it, ship it to you, and we're using part of our proceeds to go to outdoor causes. So things like restoring lean-tos and fixing bridges and trails and things that you can actually physically see and touch. So I'm really proud of this venture. We've been working on it for probably about 6 months behind the scenes, and I think the outdoor community is really going to like it.
Awesome. What will be the link to find that?
The website will be cloudsplittercoffee.com, and you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Cloudsplitter Coffee.
All right, very cool. We will wrap up this summit session with that. A fantastic story of someone seeking healing and therapy in the outdoors. Time and time again, I hear these stories, and I'm always I just have a smile on my face, because I know that the healing powers that these mountains, in particular here in the 80K, that they possess, and just another real-life example of that coming to life. Thanks to Billy for reaching out to me and telling me his incredible single-season Winter 46 story, driving 6,000 miles in total, a collapsed lung, all sorts of things. But amazing stuff, and you should be proud of what you did out there, Billy. Great job, and thanks for coming on the podcast, and thanks for all of you for listening to yet another episode of the Summit Sessions here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes. And if you have a moment and you want to help me out, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. I would greatly appreciate it. It only takes a few seconds, and I appreciate it greatly. Check out 46of46.com to pick up my new ebook, hear recent episodes of the podcast, and plenty more information on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, people. Do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails.